All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Tuesday Night Healing. We're going to get this kicked off in just a second. And, we're just going to wait for everybody to jump on. And then we'll get going. Stormy, I'm going to send you an invite real quick. Boop. I think I did it. Hope I did. Maybe. Stormy's connected. Stormy? She's on mute. I don't know if I could do, if I could hear you or not. No?
I'm here.
Okay, how does my video look? I got to turn sideways. Does it look strange?
Yes.
All right, so I'll turn it back. Hang on. All right, there we go. All right, so get kicked off tonight. Welcome back, everybody, to our Tuesday Night Healing. This is part 4. Thank you guys for in, those of you who are returning, and everybody else that's new to it. Basically, what's going on is, I'm Nick Belisi. I've written a couple of books, one of which is The Souls of Paradise. The other is Paradise Reborn. And, from people reaching out and stuff like that, they wanted us to start talking about tough subjects and stuff. So we basically started going over, because the main character in my book, Stella, has borderline personality disorder. So we started going through the different symptoms of borderline. And, we're getting close to the end. And, we've been going over different things each week. So if you haven't seen our previous videos and stuff like that, and you're interested in learning about them, you can go on our YouTube channel at the Paradise Collection. And every live chat that we do and stuff like that, later on in the night, once it downloads, I repost it on there. So to get things kicked off, we're going to go into 2 big subjects today. And like I always say at the beginning of the videos, if any of this is triggering in any way, shape, or form, please feel free to log off. We're not trying to get anybody worse off. We're just trying to provide information from someone who suffers from it, and then Stormy to give her insight as a loved one and how they deal with it with somebody having it. Now, the 2 subjects we're going to be going over tonight will be explosive anger and then disassociation. So to dive right into it, okay, we're going to talk about explosive anger. Now, explosive anger basically is, if you have BPD and you struggle with, intense anger or even a short temper. You also have trouble controlling yourself once that fuse is actually lit. Yelling, throwing tantrums, throwing things, being completely confused by the rage because you're just so caught up in it. And it's important to note that the anger isn't always directed outwards, because you spend a lot of time feeling angry at yourself. And, as anybody will tell you, what is the definition of depression? It's rage turned inward. So that explosive anger doesn't necessarily mean that, you're punching holes in the wall or you're hurting people or anything like that. It's just like that quick fuse that when you don't feel like you're being validated and stuff like that, you can get extremely angry, because remember, like, borderlines are seeing things in black and white. It's not that gray area, you know what I mean, where you can get kind of angry. It's like one extreme to the next. So to have that explosive anger, I mean, it boils up so quick. And, it's one of the things that I've dealt with. And again, it's not necessarily a dangerous thing, although there's so many different types of borderline. Some people, it may be dangerous. It may be something that needs to be checked. I luckily don't have that issue. I'm usually a very genuinely, like, easygoing and quiet person, and I internalize a lot. So when I actually get angry and stuff like that, I wind up getting extremely quiet. I usually don't blow up or anything like that. Like, it usually takes a lot to get me to that point where I'm like blowing up. So, we're going to get into it a little bit, and I'm going to give some examples. So one of the biggest things for me when it comes to the explosive anger is, like I just said before, not being validated. When somebody sits there and they look at you're borderline, or they know you have borderline. Maybe you told them, or they found out, or whatever the case may be. And they think that every emotion that you have is somehow or another generated from you having borderline. It's the equivalent to if you're in a relationship with somebody, let's just say you're in a relationship with a female, and anytime they get upset about something that you're doing, you immediately jump onto it and say, oh, like, what are you, on your period or something? You're not validating what they're actually feeling. You're blaming on something that they can't control. You know what I mean? Like women menstruate. It's a natural part of life. And you're going to blame anytime they get upset on them being on their period. It's no different when it comes to mental health, because, you know, people may view you differently, and maybe they don't do the research about borderline and stuff like that. But, you know, what winds up happening is that they hear about it, or maybe they've heard a story about maybe what borderline's about, and they instantly attribute that to, you know, that, oh, this person's just crazy, or, you know, they're just acting irrational, they're not in the right sense of mind. But it's not. And you're essentially gaslighting at that point. You're gaslighting somebody when you're sitting there and you're telling them that, like, no, that's not actually what's going on. Like, you're just basically crazy, you know, you don't know what you're talking about and stuff. Like, that's not what it is. And honestly, I feel like that's like a form of mental abuse, that you're not listening to the person. And I mean, it can be something that becomes so frustrating, because you feel like, in the sense that either A, that you are crazy and that they're right, and you have to like overthink everything that you're doing. Like, is this really happening? Is this the stuff that's really going on? And, you know, the other like side of the coin is that you're sitting there and you're just like, you know, they're not listening to me. They're not listening at all. Like, I'm trying to have my voice heard, and they're just not, they don't care. They're just going to never listen. They're just going to keep passing the buck. But it's more than that. And, you know, it's one thing if you're having a conversation in the moment and things get heated and you might say something you don't mean, or if this is an ongoing thing, you know, maybe you have a problem with somebody. Me personally, I like to carefully think out the things that I say before I say them, so that way I don't wind up regretting them later on. That I can think of clear and sound mind, you know, set my emotions aside, revisit the subject, and then say, this is actually what's going on. This is how I feel about it. I gave it a lot of thought, and this is where I stand on it. But there's so many situations, like, for example, like the last relationship I was in, you know, where there was so much gaslight going on that you were never validated. Anything you say is just like, well, you just imagine that. You're just crazy. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Like, no, like, I'm saying it because I legitimately feel it. Or I have reason to, because I have evidence, or whatever the case may be. Like, this is why I'm feeling it. And you, to get out of being persecuted for what you're doing, are just sitting there and blaming it on a mental illness you know nothing about. And that's not right. I mean, any way you spin it, it's not right. And it's going to lead to, you know, the explosive anger. And again, it may not always be directed outward. It may simply just be directed just in general. You may take all of it and internalize it. And then that just creates all the other symptoms that go along with it to become out of control, because you're holding in all that anger, and everybody needs a release, whether it be, you know, going downstairs to hit the punching bag, or to talk to a mental health professional, or to write, or anything like that. You know, there's so many other things that, you know, you can do rather than internalizing it and not feeling hurt. And it's just sad sometimes, because if you find somebody that's good at manipulation, it's so easy for them to, like, basically, like the puppet strings, sit there, like, work you like a marionette to make you bend to their will, because you're always going to think, like, are my feelings valid? Am I really feeling this? Or is it the illness? Like, what is going on with this? So it really leads to that explosive anger. Now, that's not to say, like I said before, there's other people that do their anger in more toxic ways. They're hurting people, or they're using the anger to hurt themselves. You know, it really just depends on the type of person. There's not really much more to say about that. It's just, you know, you want to be able to see what your triggers are, to see what gives you that anger. And you want to be able to find a healthy coping mechanism to decompress in that moment. Like, for example, for me, I like to go outside. I'll have a cigarette or something like that. take a couple walks around and think about it. Like, is it really worth it? How am I going to pursue this? Going forward and stuff like that. How am I going to talk to this person that is creating that issue for me? Because you can't control other people. You can only control how you react to it. Another good thing, is we've talked about this a couple times. I mentioned that Stormy had actually got me this some time ago, and I've been slowly working at it. We have the DBT workbook. I'm getting like halfway done with it, and it helps. It helps you get rid of some of those inner thoughts that maybe you don't want to talk to a professional about. Maybe you don't want to be honest with somebody about, but you could write down there because you're the only person that's going to read it. So, it's just a tough subject. And like me personally, nothing gets me more frustrated than people not listening to the emotions I'm trying to portray to them and immediately associating it to the mental illness itself. It's just so frustrating. Sometimes, you do get angry over perceived things that like aren't actually happening, but you think are going to happen. So maybe you think that, your loved one's cheating on you, or they're not showing you enough affection, but maybe they just had a hard day at work. Maybe, they're not an affectionate person like that. They show their care for you in other ways. So you kind of have to like level with yourself. Like, is this really worth getting angry over? Is it really worth, blowing up and potentially losing that person, or, family members and stuff like that? Maybe they're not getting what you're trying to say. So you immediately jump into anger and go, I'm done with this person. I don't want to talk to them anymore. It's the black and white thinking. Somehow or another, you need to rationalize with yourself and come up with a way to see the gray. Because there's a gray area in everything. Everything's up for interpretation. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Stormy. Stormy, if you want to talk about the explosive anger part of it.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, we did have some heated exchanges. There was a lot of times, that things you said to me like upset me, and so then I wanted to push your buttons and vice versa. Uh, but I think again, once I started understanding the BPD, once I started understanding your triggers, getting the boundaries, that is a huge thing, is respecting your boundaries, you respecting mine. Um, I mean, that goes with not even with every day with anybody, but when you bring in a mental illness with it, it does have a stigma. And a lot of people use that, as something to hurt you with, or that person that has BPD or whatever mental disorder. And, and I'm sure I probably did it to you. Uh, Now, for sure, I don't, but at the time, before I understood a lot of it, we had some issues. Um, it takes a lot of time and work to understand how to be friends with someone with BPD. Uh, there's just so many different things that people need to understand, that like when you're saying something, you're saying it. It's not just your BPD saying it. Like they need to understand that, this is what you're really feeling. Um, so those types of things, if people are having a struggle with someone, in a friendship, in a relationship, I mean, you just have to respect them. You have to respect their boundaries. You don't need to be throwing up their issues and saying it's because of that, and that's not really how you feel. Things like that. It just causes a lot more problems.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And, it's especially troublesome when people use like divisive words, when they use specific words that they know are going to trigger you into get you into that anger. So, especially when you're close to somebody, whether it be a friend or a relationship or something like that, there's certain words that they know will exactly pinpoint that. And I mean, a prime example would be in my last relationship, she would use divisive words to get me going. She would constantly like throw things at me and stuff like that, that, you know, I'd basically just have to swallow at that point. But it was so divisive. So for example, you know, if she would drink or something like that and she got angry, because, you know, it would happen kind of frequently whenever she would drink, she would get angry. So she knew exactly where to hit me. And I never met somebody like that, that, you know, could kind of just hit like those 5 points of your heart, just to like completely destroy it. And she always knew exactly what to say. You know what I mean? So like, for example, one time when she got angry at me, she said, you know, you're just an alcoholic piece of shit who should go kill himself because you're completely fucked in the head with your mental illness. And you're just like, whoa, like you just hit like everything all at once. Like that's insane. In just a single sentence, they pointed out every little flaw that you have to deal with and just like beat you to the ground. Like I never experienced something like that before. And it was just, it was so toxic, but it was so awakening at the same time to see just like, you know, you care about somebody so much. And like when you open yourself up like that, you know what I mean? Like you could become so vulnerable. And, you know, part of the reason too, because I learned about that was that I was going to get a tattoo and I wanted to pay tribute to Blue October. So I had gotten, you know, this my variation of the Blue October logo, you know, but in black and stuff like that, because I was going through a lot of depression and stuff like. But I got it there because I felt like I was always wearing my heart on my sleeve, and it was just constantly being taken advantage of. You know what I mean? Like you're trying to love hard and be loved in return, but you know, when somebody says that they love you and they're out cheating on you or they're out treating you terribly and saying these terrible things to you and you just can't understand why, you know what I mean? It makes that anger come out. But again, it's not like you're ever like, for me in my history, like I wasn't like explosive anger at this person. Like I can only think of like 2 major heated arguments in like the 13 years I've known her. That was it, because most of it I just internalized. You know what I mean? I would just get upset or I would drink and I would just become like a mess, like falling on the ground, like sad and stuff like that, you know, back in my heyday. And it wasn't healthy. And I did something about it because I knew I couldn't live my life like that. I couldn't be a successful parent and be the example to like my child if I was a mess and I didn't get my stuff together. So, you know, it took a lot. And like, you know, I have to give big credit to Stormy for being there for me through like the most difficult time in my life, going through, you know, a split up, a custody battle, moving into a new home, you know, readjusting my life, like moving up at work and stuff like that. Like, you know, she was there for a lot of it. And, you know, I blew up a lot of times. You know, I'd done things to like hurt her intentionally in the moment because I wasn't thinking rationally. But then over the years, you know, we got in our stride and stuff like that. And I gained like such a respect for her. And, you know, somebody asked me the other day, they said, you know, why are you so close with Stormy? Like, what is it about her? Like, why is she like your best friend? And I said, honestly, I said, it's because I hurt her. And it's so disgusting to say that, but like the reason why is because when I was going through all of my symptoms and stuff like that, like she never looked at it that way. She maybe not understood it at the time, but instead of just being like, wow, this guy is like whacked out of his mind, she like dug her heels in and said, no, I'm not going to be like everybody else in his life and just walk away from him. I'm going to actually take a second to learn about what the hell's going on in his head and figure out a way to try to get him to come back to reality. And that respect is not something anyone in my entire life has showed me. To be able to sit there and like stay like, no, like, hang on a second, I got you. We're going to figure out what's going on with you. We're going to get you right on the like on the good path. I'm not going to be another tally in your book of people that just straight up abandon you. And you know, I have to give her a lot of credit for that. And that's why I said that. It's not because like I wanted to hurt her or anything like that, but when she showed me like, no, like I'm here to stay. Like we became friends like 6 years ago through a video game. And, you know, it's not to say that we don't have like a whole mess of things in common, you know what I mean? But like she stood through the storm. I mean, hence the name. Like she, you know, she stood through it and just showed me like unconditional love, which is something I had never experienced in my entire life. And I have to give her a huge, you know, props to that. And I remind her of it all the time. And I'm glad that we hit our stride and we don't have these issues anymore. Like it's been some time, and it's knock on wood, you know what I mean? But like everything's going really well because, I know her boundaries. I accept, how she feels about things and stuff like that, just the same way she does with me. It's just a mutual respect that, you don't normally find. And we even had this discussion the other week, because we usually chat after these live chats to, discuss things and stuff like that. And, even she put it perfectly. Not everybody has a Stormy. Not everybody has that person they can lean on and stuff like that. And like when they're going through like these swings and stuff, that they can rely on, that person's not going to leave them. Because when you're going through like any one of these symptoms with borderline, you're always going to sit there and assume like, oh, I just said something like really terrible in the moment. Maybe I didn't mean it. This person's never going to talk to me again. And then boom, all that explosive anger turns into depression and is just completely weighing you down. And it could last just a few minutes. It could last a few hours. I've even had it last a few days. I mean, where like I'll just lock myself in my room, won't come out unless it's to eat or go to the bathroom or something, and I just want to be left alone. I won't answer my phone. I won't do anything. Like it's just my way of dealing with it. You know what I mean? Like just being completely alone and taking my mind off of anything that could be divisive. My phone going off with someone saying like, oh, you drank last night and man, you were like so terrible, or you said this, or you did this. Like that's only going to further the symptoms. I'd rather hear about those things when I'm back to a clear head and I could sit there and process them without the BPD kind of like ranging in on it. So that is our topic with explosive anger. Our second topic for tonight, disassociation. Now, at first, when I first heard this, I was thinking to myself, like, oh, was this like an out-of-body experience or something like that? Like, am I like hallucinating? Like, am I not really there? But it's more than that. It's people with BPD, they often struggle with paranoia or suspicious thoughts about other people's motives. When they're under stress, you may even lose touch with like reality. You can start thinking like grandiose things that just could never possibly happen. An experience known as dissociation, it's basically you're going to feel foggy or spaced out, or, sometimes like you're even outside of your body, like you're not even in control of it. Now, to talk about that, my biggest thing, like I could say when it comes to that is like the paranoia or the suspicious thoughts about other people's motives. I have that literally all the time, even to this day. My dad taught me when I was younger and stuff like that, when it comes to navigating relationships and friendships and stuff like that, it's essentially like playing chess. You need to like start thinking like 2 or 3 moves ahead. And I always had that logic of thinking. It's just like, okay, so like maybe I want to, for example, ask a girl out on a date. And I think about all the different possibilities that can happen if I ask her out. Like, I'm going to ask her out and like maybe she's not going to want to talk to me again because she's like, oh, I wasn't interested in you in that way. Or maybe we will go out and it'll turn into this. So I'm like tree branching at that point. Like, okay, so we go out and like, does she like me? Then it goes this way. If she doesn't like me, it goes this way. Like you're constantly playing these scenarios out and it becomes almost like a paranoia. But the weird thing about it too is I've always looked at BPD as a gift and a curse. I think of it as a gift because, there's certain things about this that other people won't experience. Like the way that I can love harder than a normal person would, or the way that I can feel something or experience something in a more extreme way that a normal person might never experience, or the creativity that comes along with it. Or again, with some of the dissociation, when you're overplaying people's motives and stuff like that, you're almost preparing yourself of what could happen. So you're inevitably not surprised. And I have a very, I guess, pessimistic look when it comes to people and stuff like that I'm not really close to. I'm thinking about their motives. Like, okay, this person told me that, they wanted to hang out this weekend or something like that. Like, what's their motive? Why do they want to hang out with me? Are they looking to have something with me? Or like, what is it? And you're overthinking it, but it does help in some ways. So like for me in court, when I was going through child custody and stuff like that disassociation helped me a lot, because when I was dealing with my ex and I was dealing with, the different aspects of the court and stuff like that, I was kind of preparing myself for what could happen. And a lot of the times the things that I was thinking did wind up happening. So it wasn't like an overall surprise. And I actually wound up handling it a lot better because I kind of anticipated it to happen. So you know, there's a lot of things that go along with it, but there's a lot of things that are not, because, maybe you meet somebody like a friend or a loved one or whatever the case may be, and you're always thinking like, what are they doing talking to me? Like, okay, so they were kind of mad at me today. Do they hate me? Oh my God, they must hate me. They're never going to want to talk to me again. And it just starts running with you and running and running. And it's usually never anything good. So, you begin to lose touch with reality and stuff like that. Like, there was a lot of times, and I didn't realize it in the moment, but, going through like the court proceedings, because that's especially when I noticed the disassociation, is that when I was going through it, I was so overly stressed. I was going through a child custody battle for 4 years. It cost me roughly around $100,000. I had to clean up my retirement numerous times, and thank God that my dad helped me a lot with that, but it was very stressful. The other thing that was stressful is I didn't agree with my kid's mother's parenting style or the things that she had done or situations she put her in, but I had no control over it. And obviously your kids are like the most important thing in your life. And, if you think that they're being handled inappropriately or they're in inappropriate situations, nothing kills you more to know, especially as a father. It's not to disparage a mother too, because they feel it too, but I'm speaking on behalf of being a father. There's nothing worse as a father than you can't help your little girl when you think that something is wrong. And you try and you try. Like for me, I kept trying and trying, going through, CPS, or in New Jersey, they call it DIFUS, like going through these different things to try to like navigate it to get help, and just basically being mocked. It's just like, well, no, the things that are happening are okay. There's no issue. We don't see an issue with it. It must be your mental illness, which brings it right back to where the explosive anger kicks in, because everybody doesn't validate what you're saying. I mean, even in the court, when it ended and stuff like that, even though I passed, my psyche evals and stuff like that, and I was never posed as a danger to myself or my child at any point in time during any of it, there were so many things wrong with the court case that just didn't make sense. And they couldn't even give me a distinctive answer at the end as to why I wasn't going to get custody and why I basically got bent over in the court system. They couldn't give me a distinct answer. All they basically said was that, well, he's got a mental illness. So, I mean, I even had the guy who diagnosed me in the court saying, like, you're treating it like he's got a scarlet letter on him. That's not what it is. You obviously don't understand the illness if you think that just because he has it, he's unfit to be a parent or unfit to function in society. And I tried to explain it to him. I was like, I served this country in the military. I graduated college with a bachelor's degree and a 4.0. I've written 2 novels, and I've worked at the same job for 10 years with a clean, perfect record. And you're going to sit there and say, just because I have a 3-letter word attached to me, that I'm not good enough? It just doesn't make sense. You're essentially making me pay for the sins of my mother. And that's not right. Because if anything, you know what I mean? My life is geared towards not being like her. It's not being anything like her, to being a better parent than she ever could be. So, when you have that proper motivation and stuff, there's really no room for interpretation on where your loyalty lies. So, but you think there's something wrong with you. You sit there and you think like, I must be like contagious or crazy or something, because everybody else around me is like not giving me a chance, because they think because they hear the title mental illness that you deserve to be in grippy socks in the mental health ward. And it's not always like that. It's not. And you look at where BPD stems from, and it has to do with childhood trauma. I mean, you're a child. You're just growing up like how any other kid would, but somebody else deprived you of something. They abandoned you, or they abused you, or whatever the case may be. And for the rest of your life, you have to be labeled as an issue because it's something you had no control over. Nothing. And it makes no sense. You're in the fundamentals of your entire life, learning things and, discovering the world out there. And somebody does something to you and takes away that innocence. It forces you to grow up a lot quicker. And then for the rest of your life, it's got to follow you around. It's got to punish you. That's just not fair. It's not. And you can find solace in it. You can go into remission. these symptoms and stuff like that, I mean, you'll always have it. It always has a possibility to come back, but you know, there are brighter days. There are better ways to deal with it. You're not alone. I mean, a lot of people feel even these symptoms. Like there's people who don't have BPD, and out of the 9 symptoms and stuff like that, some of them even feel like 3 of them constantly. But it takes 5 regularly to diagnose. So, you know, everybody has their issues and their ways of thinking and the way they deal with things, and maybe it's not always healthy, but that's a big part of banding together. That's a big part of being like a mental health warrior. It's a big part of that community. Like I'm on all the BPD chats and stuff like that, and I see what people post. I don't usually engage, but I see what people post, and I'm like, wow, yeah, like I felt that. I know what they're going through, and I wanted to give back to that. And the people I have reached out to me, it's definitely been more than 10, but there's been quite a bit. They've reached out to me and said, wow, like I watched you on Tuesday night talking about this stuff, and man, that just hit at home. It hit me real deep. Thanks for talking about that. Can I make a suggestion? Can you talk about this when you're done with that? Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what it's all about. We're all banding together and sticking together. This isn't going to be a BPD thing all the time. We're going to get through the 9 symptoms, and we're going to go on to a lot of other things. I got the big book AA. Like we're going to go through different things to reach out and help people that don't feel like their voice is being heard, to basically give them some solace, even if it is just for an hour. You know what I mean? You just got to be there. But, when you're dissociating and stuff like that, to get back on topic, it's tough. It's tough to realize whether, this is real or not, or if you're just imagining it. And, you kind of just got to take a step back and really think about it. Like, is this possible? Like for me, there's certain things like during court and stuff like that, I would ask my dad, I'd be like, this is what I'm thinking. Like, is my ex doing this? Is this what's going on and stuff like that? And he'd be like, oh, it seems like kind of crazy. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not real. Like, I'm pretty sure you're just imagining that. And then I have to take a step back, and I would write down in my journal and stuff like that. I'd be like, oh, this is what I'm feeling and stuff. And then I'd look back on it a couple weeks later and I'd be like, yeah, that was kind of crazy. Maybe that's really not going on. But when you react to it, that's when the explosive anger can kick in and stuff like that, because you're going to start basically getting mad at somebody for something that you're perceiving as real, but might not necessarily be real. So, it's tough. You kind of have to teeter-totter with it and, come up with, I don't know, I guess a healthy way to bring yourself back to reality and, think clearly. So, Stormy, I want to let you jump in and give your input on dissociation.
There is definitely certain times where even myself, have issues like that, but yours definitely seem to be exturbated because of certain things or times, things you're going through. There's a lot of times that you'll ask me the same thing like you asked your dad. Does this seem far out there? Is this real? And it's on numerous things. It's not just one certain thing, but we definitely have a lot of conversations about things going on with, people, with friends, with family, things going on. So it is good to discuss it because like you said, the black and white, so you kind of need somebody to have the gray brought in to help you when you're having issues with dissociation. So that's a good thing, is communication is definitely key. And a lot of times, like you said, like if you're in a certain place, sometimes you don't want to talk to anybody. And then again, that's where the boundaries, where people have to respect that and have to understand that, you need some time to cool down. You need some time to figure things out. You need quiet time, things like that. So it all goes together, and definitely I've seen, like you for sure, have learned to deal with both things, the explosive anger and the disassociation, a lot more, for sure.
Yeah. And again, you know what I mean? Like what Stormy was saying, like I confided with her a lot and stuff like that about things I was feeling and stuff like that. And there's even times where she'd call me out and say like, that's probably not real. That's probably not what's going on. You know what I mean? But she puts it in a way that's different. So an example would be, it's different when someone's just like, I know this is your BPD talking. This isn't obviously you. As opposed to the way that Stormy handles it and say, you know what? Like, hey, why don't you think about it for a little bit? Like, take a step back. Like just go outside, take a breather. Like, just relax. Like, come back to it in a little bit. If you still feel like this, then we'll talk about it. That's the healthy way of doing it, and then there's the wrong way of doing it. Because if somebody just immediately throws it at you and says you're mentally ill, you don't feel like this, and you should not feel like this, you just created the explosive anger. You just lit the fuse, and now things are going to get wild. And I realized too, we actually are at the end of our BPD thing. We only have one symptom left because there's 9. This is our 4th session. We usually do 2 in each. So since we have some time, I'm going to throw that last one in there too. And that last one is probably the weirdest one, but the one that I would say I feel the absolute most, even to this day. And that's chronic feelings of emptiness. Now, the chronic feelings of emptiness, it's people with BPD often talk about feeling completely empty. It's as if there's a hole or a void or something inside of them. It's at an extreme, you're going to feel like that you're nothing or nobody. And this feeling is so uncomfortable. So you try to fill the void with things like drugs, food, sexual encounters, but nothing is ever satisfying. That was the biggest thing I had my entire life of knowing, like even before I knew what borderline was and stuff like that. I had this void, and it always stuck with me for a very, very long time. And it was like, I never felt like I was worth anything. Like I had no self-worth whatsoever. So I would constantly beat myself up in my head and stuff like that and think like, I'm not good enough. I'm not, like, I could never do anything successful in my life and stuff like that. So like, I would turn to things like drugs when I was younger and stuff like that, or alcohol or promiscuous, just having random encounters and stuff like that. And it always left me feeling empty. It never helped. People would sit there and tell you, like when you're going through a breakup or something like that, they'd be like, oh, get with somebody else. It'll make you feel a lot better because your mind will be off them. No. After my last relationship, where I was like truly, truly in love for the first time in my life, I went and I tried that. Like maybe a month after we'd broken up or something like that, I was just like, I need to get my mind off this. I'm crying all the time. I was losing like a ridiculous amount of weight. I wasn't eating. I was just smoking cigarettes a lot, and I was just using Jack Daniels to cope with that loss, and it was not good. And I was like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to figure it out. So I wound up going out, and I met somebody at the bar, and I was talking to them and stuff like that, and it turned into like a random encounter. But even during it and stuff like that, all I was thinking about was the person I was in love with, and I couldn't keep going with it. Like it was too much. Like it was just so weird, especially when you're only with somebody for so long, to do that just to try to get over them. I wouldn't recommend it. But it leaves you feeling empty. And like most of my encounters in life in that arena and stuff like that were like single night things. And in the moment, you know what I mean? You're like, oh, this is great. This is so much fun. But then when you wake up in the morning, you just feel so alone. Like the creature comfort's nice in the moment, but once it's gone, you think to yourself, like, why did I do that? Like this wouldn't even be somebody I would normally even talk to. I'm doing all this stuff. Like it's tough. It's really tough. I mean, there's other things, too. And I'll notice that, like, I'll be going to work or something like that. And, I'll be sorting the mail or working the window. And then just something in my head, it could not even be like something that someone says, but something in my head goes off. And it just feels so empty. And, like, even the people at work and stuff like that, they can pick up on it. One of my closest friends, Ryan, and stuff like that, he'll say, like, oh, I can tell your BPD's acting up. You're getting like real quiet and stuff, and you're not really talking to anybody and stuff. And it's like in my head, like I have a war going on in my mind, and I'm not really paying attention to anything else. And I'm not feeling sad. I'm not feeling happy. Like I'm just feeling completely lost and completely empty. And that was a big thing that literally I feel like is at the epicenter, which is why I saved it for the end. It's at the epicenter because all the other stuff comes because of that feeling of emptiness. The risky behaviors or the drinking or, all of that stuff is because you want to feel something. The self-harm. You're making yourself feel pain that you can control and stuff like that. Hi, Alana. And, you're basically just trying to control it. You're trying to be able to get away to, feel something in life, to feel just that you're real, that you're alive, that, something, because that emptiness is just like one of the hardest things in the world to kick. You're depressed, but like, you're not crying. You're not happy. You're not sad. Like, you're just alone. You feel like you're absolutely alone. Hi, Alana. And you can't live like that. And it lasts for a long time. I mean, it absolutely can. It can absolutely last for quite a while. And it's really tough to pull yourself out of it. And it's almost like you don't even know when you pull out of it. You just kind of like, oh, now I feel okay again. Now I want to socialize. Now I want to, be a part of society again. But for a long time, you just like want to be alone. So like my biggest thing is like I like to sit in like a very dark lit room and, like watch. For me, like with my anxiety and stuff like that, like I like to watch the same shows over and over again. So I'll watch The Sopranos over and over again, or I'll watch The Office or Parks and Rec or something like that. And it'll constantly, help me out in a sense to, I can close my eyes and focus on other things because I already know what's happening in the show. So I can kind of, just like drift away a little bit and then start to bring myself back, into all of this. So it's a tough one. Honestly, it's my least favorite part of the entire thing is just having that emptiness, because no matter what you try to do, you can't fill the void. You can't. And you just keep trying different thing after thing after thing, and nothing does it. Nothing seems to be able to make you feel like you're whole, like you're just empty, you're lost. It's literally like traveling somewhere, you have no direction and going and stuff like that. You don't even know why you're traveling there in the first place. You're just lost. And I'll let Stormy jump in now and explain about that.
There's definitely been a lot of times where you've been in that or feeling that, for sure. And I mean, I've tried lots and lots and lots of things to not necessarily snap you out of it, but help you through it, to get you motivated to, especially when you were writing your books, social media stuff, those types of things. I feel like when you have uh, a purpose or you have something to do, that you're in a more happy place than when you're isolated or not, you know, associating with a lot of people or being social. So sometimes I know you like that quiet you time to deal with things, but I also feel like sometimes I have to get you out of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Stormy gave a perfect example. A lot of the things in my life and stuff like that, I feel like I need a purpose. I need a schedule. I need a regimen. And it prevents me from feeling that way and going into that. So, for example, like, when I have my daughter, like, I love spending every second with her. And, like, when I have my weekends with her, we are literally, like, stuck at the hip the entire weekend. We're, like, never alone. Or we're never apart from each other, like, in the house. Like, we are always literally next to each other the entire time doing something. And maybe something as simple as, watching just a movie together. Like, our big thing is, like, we watch horror movies together and stuff. Like, that's our thing. She's into, like, darker stuff and everything as well. So, we have a lot of bonding that goes along with that, along with other things as well. And when I have her around and stuff like that, that's when I feel like I'm at my happiest, because I miss her so much and stuff. And, I don't get to see her as much as I'd like to. She does live a little distance away, but at least an hour without traffic. And, with working a full-time schedule and stuff, it's difficult, but we have our moments. And when we get together, we always have a good time. Like a big thing with us is we like to sit there and we like to play Uno. And she is like miraculous at it. She's so good at Uno, and it's unreal how quickly I could just be sitting there and like, oh, I got this in the bag. And then she's like, boom, 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 done. And she's got her hand out like, I beat you, Dad. Like it's such an awesome thing that we have together. And, I love talking about it and, everything with her. And, I feel I have a purpose at that point. You know what I mean? Like I'm happy. Like I'm spending time with, the person I love most in this entire world. And it's such a great thing. And there she is. I know you're so bad at Uno. Well, the next time you come, we'll see about that. And, it makes me the happiest. But then when she's not here, that's when I notice like it's a shift. Because you're so used to, well, like when she's in the house, I always call it the pitter patter. You just hear like her little feet upstairs, like, and she's got such heavy feet that you can hear her pretty well. So, when I'm here on like a Friday or a Saturday or something like that, and I don't hear that, it's kind of disheartening. And I almost feel like I don't have like a purpose. Like I don't have anything to do. It's not like a boredom thing. It's more of like a love lost kind of thing. And I try to find other things to entertain myself. So I'll have like friends over. We'll do like trivia or something like that. Or, I'll do things around the house. Like I'll try to mow the lawn or keep myself occupied, or I'll write, or I'll pick up a video game and I'm like, this is what I'm doing all weekend to keep my mind straight and this is it. But it's tough. It's very tough to do that without, the emptiness setting in. Like, for example, like a big thing with me is I usually keep her door closed when she's not here because, when I see it and I don't see her like so lively and stuff like that, it makes me upset. So it's just something that I've learned to do to kind of deal with that separation, because it is tough. I mean, anyone that's gone through a similar situation and stuff like that can speak to that and say, it's tough not having your kids around, especially if it's something that is like out of your control. I mean, you do the best you can, and you be there for them and stuff and you love them. But, it's tough because, in my opinion, what I mean? When you have a kid and stuff like that, you're not supposed to be separate from them. You're supposed to spend your life with them until they obviously grow up, get their own life, and then, move on with it. But, you're always going to be there no matter what. And you just got to take it in strides. But that's like the chronic feeling of emptiness that we were talking about. And to go into the very, very last part so we can go on to our next subject next week, there's 4 real subtypes when it comes to this stuff, when it comes to BPD. You have your impulsive BPD, you have your discouraged BPD, you have your self-destructive BPD, you have your petulant BPD. So like the 4 main subgroups. Again, there's like, if I'm not mistaken, there's 256 different variations of it. So it doesn't mean you're one of these 4 things. They just classify them into like, these are the major subtypes. So for example, like impulsive BPD would be, the major feature of this is difficulty with impulse control. These individuals are at high risk for self-harm, including attempts, at taking their life, and they often become engaged in thrill-seeking activities. Another one would be discouraged BPD, which is very dependent on others, very needy, very clingy. These individuals often present as being very passive until they perceive themselves as being abandoned. Once they feel abandoned, issues with anger, control, and emotional instability start to arise. Although they are dependent and clingy, any amount of attention will not satisfy them. Because, you always got it in your head that they're going to leave you, they're not good enough, and you're just constantly beating yourself up. You have self-destructive, which it harbors intense feelings of bitterness and self-hatred. They attempt to find comfort in getting attention from others. And if this need is not satisfied, which it never is, they may turn into self-destructive behaviors, such as, self-harm or substance abuse or potentially thrill-seeking stuff. And the last one is petulant BPD. And this fluctuates between outbursts of explosive anger and feeling towards being unworthy or unloved. They have a strong need to manipulate or control others, and they become very possessive, which in result in extreme dissatisfaction with their relationships, and this leads to issues with substance abuse and other damaging issues. All those things, they all share a lot of things in common. So, to sit there and say that I fall under one of these categories, chances are you probably fall under all of them, depending on what's going on. But that's just the way the DSM-5 looks at it. They look at it in a way that, well, okay, so how can we start narrowing it down? Because the more you narrow it down and stuff like that, you might be able to find out ways to help people. You might be able to find out a way that, like, okay, so this person, like, going down the tree branches, this is, okay, so they're this part of it. Well, we can give them this, and this will fix them. Or DBT will help them with this. or, whatever the case may be. So they try to narrow it down as much as possible, but no person is the same. Everybody's got their own different things. So, you just have to figure out what yours is. Like I said, I've always suggested and always will keeping a journal. I've always done it. I will always do it. It's something that I could always look back on and stuff like that and see how I've evolved or how I was feeling at that time, or maybe compare it to a situation that might be reoccurring again and be like, well, how did I handle it in the past? How did that turn out? Maybe I'll try it this way this time. Write it down. And maybe it goes this way. So if it happens the third time, like, okay, so I tried this way, this is how they went. And you just keep going until you find a rhythm, that works for you and helps you get through the everyday, stuff. So, just to wrap this up real quick before we go out, we're just going to say one more time the 9 symptoms. You got your fear of abandonment. You got your unstable relationships. You got your unclear or shifting self-image, like an identity disturbance. You have impulsive or self-destructive behaviors, self-harm, emotional swings, chronic feelings of emptiness, explosive anger, and disassociation. If you haven't watched us before, like I said earlier in the video, you could certainly jump onto our YouTube and you could check out all the other lives we've done so far. Because if it's your first time here, Tuesday night we do our healings where we talk about issues and stuff like that, which next week I will post up on the TikTok what subject we're going to be diving into next, and then we will talk about that. Thursdays, we go over my first book and talk about the Easter eggs. My first book, Souls of Paradise. We go over the Easter eggs and stuff like that, talk about how the story developed and like insider info where, you guys get to learn about my process of coming up with the story itself and how it developed into what it is. So this Thursday, we are going to be jumping into that. So if you want to know more about the book, you can certainly log in and do that. If you don't know, both my books are on sale on Amazon for 99 cents for the Kindle. And you could jump on there and you could certainly read along with us or check out the book. Take a look at the reviews and stuff like that. You'll see a lot of people really, really like this book. And I'm so grateful and stuff like that, you guys took such an interest in it and then you bonded with the characters. And, I promised you a little insight tonight to the people that have been following along. I have just finished chapter 2 of the 3rd book. I really like this chapter. The insight is this. The name of the chapter is Nobody Likes Liverwurst. It's going to be a fun chapter. It's not a sad chapter whatsoever. It's a very happy and fun chapter, and it really gives you a deeper insight to Stella's life. And we're really coming along with it. It's slow going right now because I want to make sure it's perfect to conclude the series, but I'm 52 pages into it. I've got about probably another 350 to go before I feel like I've accomplished what I was looking to do. And, it's really starting to come together. Yes, it's my favorite chapter name as well. And, usually what I'll do is as I finish the chapters, I'll jump on after this, I'm going to jump on with Stormy and read her chapter 2 to get her insight and stuff like that. And, it helps with my process and stuff of getting, her take on it and stuff like that. Like the second book I read literally as I finished every chapter to her. We did Thursday night, Stormy story time. And, it also influenced me to keep writing and stuff like that and whatnot. So stay tuned. I will definitely be posting some teasers and stuff like that. It's tough to post a lot of teasers about it because if you haven't read the second book, I don't want to give away what happened because the 3rd book picks up 2 months after the second one concludes. But I will definitely get some teasers out there for you guys following along. I don't have a realistic release date yet. I'm hoping for spring, but it really just depends. I mean, I work at the Postal Service, so this is going to be our busiest time of the year coming up in October all the way to January. So, I don't want to make any promises as far as a release date, but I will definitely keep you guys apprised the entire journey through it. So, like I said, make sure you check us out on Thursday night for the Easter egg book review, and then next Tuesday on our next subject matter, which I will post by the end of the week. If you haven't already and your first time on here, make sure you like the page and follow along so that way you can see all the stuff that we're going about. To close it out, if anybody has any issues or anything like that, or they want to talk about anything, Stormy and myself always have our direct messages open, so you can reach out to us. There is no judgment passed. Don't feel bad. It could be literally about anything, even if you just need somebody to talk to. And again, if you have any topics that you want to hear us talk about, or you would like to join us on the live chat, please reach out to one of us. We'd love to have you on here. We'd love to talk about things. Maybe you didn't know what borderline was, and maybe I taught you something from going on here. Maybe there's something you could teach us that we didn't know. It's all about helping each other. So please, don't feel bad about reaching out. That's what we want to do. We want to help everybody. We want to be there, and have a voice and stuff. So I'll leave it at that. I'll let Stormy say her goodbye before I end this.
Good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Mm-hmm. So I hope you guys have a good rest of your week, and thank you so much for logging on and listening to me rant for the last hour. I really enjoy doing this with you guys, and I hope it's helping you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys on Thursday.